The Galactic Empire had not been challenged in 312 standard cycles, and even the word challenge felt like an indulgence rather than a truth. Conquest had become procedural. Resistance was catalogued, analyzed, and dissolved with the same detached efficiency used to regulate trade routes or recalibrate orbital defenses. Empires were not built on passion, they were built on inevitability. The Great Council Chamber reflected that belief perfectly. It was a structure grown rather than built, layers of bioarchitected stone and living crystal spiraling upward into a ceiling so distant it faded into darkness. Light came not from lamps but from energy veins pulsing slowly through the walls, responding to the collective biosignatures of the species present. The more powerful the civilization, the stronger the glow around its seeding ring. The center floated the imperial sigil, a massive geometric construct that rotated with precise slowness, symbolizing balance, order, and unbreakable hierarchy. Beneath it, representatives of nearly 4,000 sentient species observed, calculated, and waited. This was not a place of debate anymore. That era had ended centuries ago. The Council no longer decided if something would happen, only how efficiently. The matter of the day was Earth. Most members of the Council regarded the name with mild disinterest. Humanity was filed under emerging civilizations, Class C, technologically competent but socially volatile, capable of producing impressive bursts of innovation followed by periods of internal collapse. They were known for paradoxes, cooperative yet combative, empathetic yet destructive, idealistic yet brutally pragmatic when threatened. The Empire had allowed them a diplomatic seat less out of respect and more out of habit. Granting observation status smoothed absorption later. The humans were expected to fracture on their own within a few centuries regardless. Empires had patience measured in millennia. When the human representative entered the chamber, there was no ripple of reaction. She walked alone and a guard followed her. No defensive drones hovered nearby. No ceremonial attire marked her as important. She wore neutral fabrics designed for comfort rather than intimidation, colored in subdued tones that blended easily with the ambient lighting. Her pace was unhurried, neither deferential nor confrontational. She moved like someone entering a familiar room rather than the most powerful political chamber in the known galaxy. Several council members noted this with mild curiosity. Others flagged it as a cultural misunderstanding. Humans often failed to grasp the symbolic language of power. She stopped at the designated position for non-core species envoys and waited an OBOW.NO proclamation to NO attempt to draw attention. The Imperial High Speaker, a massive being of layered chitin and luminescent membranes, initiated the session. Its voice resonated across the chamber without amplification, carried on harmonic frequencies that translated automatically for all present. The Empire acknowledged the arrival of Earth's representative. Formalities were observed. Protocols were recited. Historical summaries were displayed across the shared cognitive lattice. Humanity's rise from planetary conflict to limited interstellar travel unfolded in clean, compressed data streams. Wars, recoveries, breakthroughs, collapses, unity movements, fragmentation, reunification. A predictable pattern. The Empire had seen it thousands of times. What was less predictable was the human woman's expression as the summary played. She did not look impressed or defensive. She did not attempt to interject or correct the record. Her face remained composed, eyes attentive, posture relaxed but aligned. She absorbed the narrative of her species as if listening to an old story she already knew by heart. When the Imperial speaker concluded, the tone shifted subtly. The Empire expressed concern over Earth's rapid militarization, concern over unauthorized expansion beyond permitted trade corridors, concern over repeated violations of containment advisories issued for the protection of humanity and neighboring systems. The language was neutral, dispassionate, almost kind. The Empire did not threaten. It did not accuse. It simply explained consequences as one might explain gravity. The woman diplomat listened without interruption. When it was her turn to speak, she did not begin immediately. She paused, just long enough for several council members to register discomfort. Silence was unusual here. Most envoys rushed to fill it, afraid of appearing uncertain. She was not. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and unremarkable in tone. There was no attempt at rhetorical flourish. Earth acknowledged the Empire's concerns. Earth valued peace. Earth had no intention of destabilizing the region. She used language so carefully measured it almost disappeared into itself. Some members of the Council relaxed. This was familiar. Emerging civilizations always sounded like this at first. Gratitude, assurances, willingness to cooperate. But then she asked a question. It was not confrontational. It was framed as a request for clarification. She asked how many independent species the Empire currently governed by force rather than treaty. The chamber stilled, not dramatically, but perceptibly. The question was not forbidden, but it was unnecessary. The answer was publicly available. The Empire did not hide its conquests. The imperial speaker answered without hesitation. Thousands. The woman nodded slowly, as if confirming a calculation. She asked another question. How many of those species had once been offered protective oversight similar to what Earth was now receiving? There was a fractional pause before the answer came. Most. Still no reaction from her. No visible judgment. She asked a third question. How many of those species had voluntarily remained within the Empire once technological parity was achieved? The answer was fewer. The Council exchanged subtle signals. Data tags passed quietly between intelligence representatives. This line of questioning was unusual. Not dangerous, but inconvenient. Humans were known for asking inefficient questions. Emotional ones. Philosophical ones. The Empire responded anyway. The woman thanked them and said nothing more. No demands, no objections, no resistance. To the observers, it looked like compliance. After the session ended, internal analyses circulated rapidly. The consensus was reassuring. Earth's envoy was intelligent but ultimately constrained by her civilization's limitations. Curiosity did not equate to defiance. The questions were likely a domestic performance, gestures meant to placate Earth's internal factions resistant to integration. The recommendation was to proceed. Pressure would be applied gradually. Access limitations. Resource tariffs. Strategic restrictions framed as safety measures. Earth would adapt, as all others had. The woman diplomat returned to Earth without incident. Months passed. During that time, the Empire observed increasing human activity. Not militarily aggressive, but reorganized. Supply chains shifted. Civilian infrastructure expanded in patterns that did not align with economic projections. Communications traffic intensified, but encryption protocols remained within acceptable civilian ranges. Empire analysts flagged it as internal consolidation. Humans were prone to overreaction. Fear often drove inefficient resource allocation. The Empire adjusted containment measures slightly. Earth responded not with protest, but with silence. No appeals. No escalation. Another council session was convened. The woman returned, same attire, same posture, same calm. The Empire did not notice the first loss. That, in hindsight, was what unsettled its surviving analysts the most. No alarm sounded. No battle reports were filed. One of the outer logistics nodes simply failed to check in on its scheduled cycle. The automated systems flagged it as a routine malfunction, likely caused by long-distance signal degradation or internal error. A repair drone was dispatched along a pre-programmed route. It never arrived. Its disappearance was logged, downgraded in priority, and forgotten beneath layers of more pressing administrative traffic. Then another node went dark. Then three. None of them were frontline installations. None carried weapons powerful enough to warrant concern. They were fuel depots, data relays, resupply anchors that existed purely to keep the Empire's vast military machine moving smoothly across interstellar distances. They had been built with redundancy in mind, scattered across space so widely that no enemy had ever bothered targeting them. No enemy had ever needed to, until now. Imperial sensor arrays eventually detected debris fields where the nodes had once been, but the signatures were wrong. There were no signs of high-energy weapons fire, no radiation spikes consistent with no munitions, no battle formations frozen in the wreckage. The structures appeared to have been dismantled from within, as if the vacuum itself had reached inside and pulled them apart piece by piece. The Empire searched for attackers and found nothing. No fleets. No energy trails. No gravitational disturbances large enough to suggest conventional propulsion. Whatever had destroyed the nodes had done so quietly, efficiently, and without announcing its presence to the wider battlefield. For the first time since the warning transmission, a thread of unease worked its way through Imperial command. Orders were issued to increase patrol density along major supply corridors. Sensor sensitivity thresholds were lowered. The Empire's fleets, accustomed to projecting power through overwhelming visibility, began to look inward, scanning the darkness between stars with unfamiliar caution. That was when the communications failures began. Entire task groups found themselves unable to contact Central Command for minutes at a time. Then hours. Then not at all. Backup systems activated as designed, only to fail in identical ways. The Empire's network architecture, optimized for efficiency rather than resilience, struggled to adapt. Information flowed along predictable routes. Humans, it turned out, had been listening to those routes for years. Long before the first strike on Earth, human observers had mapped Imperial communications not by breaking encryption, but by studying behavior. Transmission timing. Signal prioritization. The subtle patterns that emerged when a system had grown complacent through centuries of uncontested dominance. The Empire had never needed to hide its logistics. No one had ever been able to touch them. Humans did not attack the fleets. They attacked the idea that fleets could exist without support. More nodes vanished. Then shipyards. Then data archives. Entire libraries of Imperial doctrine were erased in precise pulses that left surrounding systems untouched. The Empire attempted to reroute command authority, only to discover that the alternative pathways were already compromised. Not destroyed, but altered. Human code threaded itself through Imperial systems like a parasite that had learned exactly how much damage it could cause without revealing its full presence. The first Imperial fleet was lost without ever seeing an enemy. It ran out of fuel in deep space, far from any habitable system. Distress calls went unanswered. Life support degraded. When recovery teams finally arrived weeks later, they found ships intact, weapons cold, crews dead at their stations. No battle damage. No signs of struggle. Just silence and the unmistakable evidence of a machine that had been starved rather than slain. Panic did not spread immediately. The Empire's leadership had ruled for too long to surrender to fear at the first sign of irregularity. They reassured themselves that this was an anomaly, a coincidence, an overreaction to a minor setback. Humans were still pre-FTL in meaningful numbers. They reminded each other. Humans did not possess fleets capable of matching Imperial firepower. Humans had been struck and had not responded openly. What they failed to account for was that humans did not measure victory in destroyed ships. They measured it in removed options. As weeks passed, the Empire's civilian worlds began to feel the strain. Trade routes faltered. Automated manufacturing centers slowed without explanation. Energy shortages rippled outward from systems that had never experienced scarcity. Imperial citizens, raised on the certainty of eternal order, encountered disruption for the first time in recorded history. Rumors spread faster than official statements could contain them. Some claimed a rival empire had emerged from beyond the mapped galaxy. Others whispered of ancient machines awakening in the void. A few spoke the name of Earth, though few truly believed a single newly contacted species could be responsible for such widespread destabilization. The Empire's military council convened an emergency session. Holographic projections filled the chamber, displaying failure after failure across the Empire's infrastructure. Admirals argued over strategy. Some demanded a full-scale assault on Earth, a cleansing strike that would erase the problem at its source. Others cautioned restraint, pointing out that the Empire no longer possessed clear intelligence on human capabilities. The idea that Earth might be bait, a lure drawing the Empire into a trap, was voiced and immediately dismissed as paranoia. The argument ended when another transmission arrived. This one did not come alone. Across hundreds of Imperial systems, displays activated simultaneously. Not hacked, not overridden, but accessed through permissions the Empire did not realize it had left exposed. The message was identical everywhere: translated perfectly into every imperial language. Again, there were no faces. Again, the voices were calm. The humans did not threaten. They did not boast. They did not demand surrender. They spoke as if delivering a report. They listed the imperial supply nodes that had been destroyed in the order they had fallen. They described the Empire's communications architecture with unsettling accuracy, highlighting redundancies that no longer existed. They identified fleet groups currently stranded beyond resupply range, their estimated survival times calculated down to the hour. Then the voices paused. "You taught us your rules," they said. "We learned how to break them." The message ended. Chaos followed. Imperial commanders scrambled to secure their systems, only to find that many of the tools they relied upon were compromised or unavailable. Fleets were ordered to regroup, but regrouping required fuel, coordination, and trust in communications that no longer functioned reliably. Attempts to launch a direct assault on Earth stalled before they began, not because of human defenses, but because the Empire could no longer guarantee that its ships would arrive where they were sent. The humans still did not appear. There were no triumphant broadcasts, no footage of battles, no visible armadas advancing across the stars. The absence itself became a weapon. Every unexplained malfunction, every delayed report, every missing shipment carried the unspoken implication that humans might be responsible, or worse, that they were watching. Within Imperial space, military discipline began to erode. Crews questioned orders that sent them beyond established supply lines. Captains hesitated to engage unknown contacts. Entire squadrons remained docked, unwilling to venture into a void that had become unpredictable and hostile, and through it all, human forces maintained a single, unbroken rule. No civilian targets, worlds that posed no military threat were left untouched. Population centers were spared even when disabling them would have accelerated the Empire's collapse. This restraint, incomprehensible to imperial strategists accustomed to terror as a tool of compliance, only deepened the psychological damage. The Empire could not portray humans as monsters when the evidence contradicted the claim. It could not rally its citizens with fear of extermination when their homes still stood. What it could not escape was humiliation. The Empire, architect of countless subjugations, found itself unable to force a response from a species it had dismissed as irrelevant. Its fleets were intact but ineffective. Its authority was absolute in theory and meaningless in practice. Its enemies were invisible, methodical, and utterly uninterested in conquest. When the Empire finally sued for terms, it did so quietly. The message was sent along every channel that still functioned, stripped of arrogance and formality. The Empire offered technology, territory, political autonomy for Earth, even a seat within its ruling council. It promised never to strike human worlds again. It framed the request as mutual benefit, as cooperation, as the natural evolution of interstellar relations. The operation was aborted, then shots were fired. The Empire's image suffered a blow more damaging than a lost battle. For the first time, the galaxy saw the Empire hesitate. That hesitation was fatal. When the Empire finally requested renewed negotiations, the tone had changed. There were no demands, no assumptions of inevitability. The language was cautious, almost respectful. The human woman general agreed to meet. This time, the venue was human-controlled space. Imperial representatives arrived to find no ceremonial displays, no intimidation, just efficiency. Security was present but unobtrusive. No visible weapons. No hostility. She entered the chamber and did not sit. "You have questions," she said. "I will answer them." They asked why negotiations had been rejected initially. "Because you came seeking compliance," she replied. "Now you come seeking understanding. That difference matters." They asked what humanity wanted. "We want the cycle to end," she said. "Empires that expand because they can inevitably encounter species that will not yield. When that happens, annihilation becomes your only remaining tool. Humanity refuses to be either conquered or exterminated." They asked what the alternative was. She outlined it without embellishment. The Empire would dismantle its doctrine of forced annexation. It would recognize sovereign equality regardless of power disparity. Reparations would be paid, not as punishment, but as acknowledgement of harm. Imperial fleets would withdraw from contested regions. Oversight mechanisms would be established to prevent future coercion. It was, by imperial standards, unthinkable, and if we refuse, one representative asked quietly. She met his gaze. Then we continue, she said. And you will lose things you cannot replace. Not worlds. Not fleets. Credibility. Cohesion. Purpose. Empires survive on belief as much as force. We are dismantling the belief. The silence that followed was different from the first meeting. This time, it was heavy with understanding. The Empire accepted, not because it had been defeated in battle, but because it finally understood what it was facing. In the cycles that followed, the galaxy changed. Empires grew cautious. Smaller species found space to breathe. Humanity did not ascend as a conqueror. It did not seek tribute or territory. It simply enforced a boundary. The human woman general faded once more into obscurity. No statues were raised. No anthems composed. Within humanity, she was remembered not as a warrior, but as a custodian, someone who had carried unbearable responsibility and set it down once the task was complete. Across the galaxy, her legacy was simpler. When humans refused to negotiate, it was not arrogance. It was a warning, and the Empire, for all its age and power, had learned too late that the most terrifying thing a species could say was not a threat of war, but a calm, final refusal to ask permission.